Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today I'm going to be doing my January NHL mock draft and my 2020 prospect rankings. Now February is officially upon us and the 2020 NHL draft is just a few months away. But which prospects do I see as the best in this 2020 draft and which prospects make my top 15? Watch till the end for all my rankings and opinions and of course subscribe if you're new. Now, just like the other monthly mock drafts, this is my personal top 15 rankings. These are, in my opinion, the best prospects in the 2020 draft. I have assigned teams to each of these selections, but don't get me wrong, this is not a mock draft per se. These are my top 15 rankings, but I also have teams to go along with these picks to get an idea of where these players might go. But starting out today's February NHL mock draft with my 15th best NHL prospect in 2020, and at number 15, I'm going to select Jeremy Poirier. Now, to me, Poirier is the 15th best prospect in the draft right now, and the second best defenseman prospect in this draft. The defenseman at age 17, the Canadian kid in the QMJHL, has had himself a pretty good season. Now, points-wise, he's declined a little bit, but when it comes to raw potential and raw skill, there's not many more guys in the whole draft that can surpass a guy like Poirier. Now, Poirier, so far in 49 games with St. John, has gotten 15 goals, 27 assists for 42 points thus far. Also among CHL draft players and defensemen, he is first in shots. So he has been getting a lot of offense production, and the points do back that up. Now, the strengths are evident, and the weaknesses are evident too. When it comes to the weaknesses, he sometimes can make some glaring mistakes, and defensively, there is some mishaps. But offensively, and even in his own end, I think there's so much potential to be a top 2 defenseman in the NHL someday. If he rounds out those mistakes, he'll be a guy that is dynamic at puck moving and dynamic at goal scoring. But now, moving on to my 14th best prospect in 2020, I'm going to go good old Canadian kid, Connor Zary. Now, the 18-year-old so far in the WHL has had a great season. Zary wasn't ranked in my last month mock draft, but was around that 16th area, now coming in at number 14. But Zary so far this season has been super impressive. So far in 41 WHL games, getting 28 goals, 33 assists for 61 points. Now those points are very good, but you also have to determine how good it is for his age, because he is one of the oldest prospects in this draft, coming in at a September birthday. He's a guy that, although it still is impressive, again, is a pretty old prospect. But at the same time, I still think he has some excellent offensive potential and could become one of the best second-line centers in the NHL someday. So far, being amazing with the Kamloops Blazers. And now getting into my 13th pick, my 13th best prospect in 2020, going for number 12 in last month in January to number 13 here today, I have goaltender Yaroslav Askarov. Now, some people usually do ask me all the time in these videos, why don't you have the Yaroslav Askarov in the top 10? And it's pretty much just a rule of mine that I never put goalies ever in the top 10. I rarely put them ever at the top 15. For instance, I had Spencer Knight outside the first round of my rankings last year. Yaroslav Askarov, though, still at the same time is an amazing goalie prospect and one of the best goalie prospects we've ever seen. Now, the 6'3" Russian goaltender, yes, did have a pretty rocky World Juniors, but especially excluding just a couple of games he played there, his season so far has been pretty fantastic. He's been great in the VHL, getting a .923 save percentage, and so far has played a KHL game at 17 years old, which is very, very rare for any goaltender whatsoever. Askarov, though, is a guy who I think will be a starter nonetheless in the NHL. I personally wouldn't pick him in the top 10, but for a team that's in need of goaltending, Yaroslav Askarov is pretty much the only choice to go in the first round. And now getting into my number 12 pick, my 12th best prospect in 2020, I'm going to go with Czech stud Jan Mysak. Now, I've fortunately been able to watch a lot of Jan Mysak in the past couple of weeks, whether it be his OHL time just coming recently to the Hamilton Bulldogs or his play in the Czech League. Jan Mysak has convinced me that he is a top prospect in this draft and one of the best of them. Right now, sitting at age 17 as a left winger, Jan Mysak came into the Hamilton Bulldogs just in the past couple of weeks and has gotten 4 goals in 5 games. Not bad whatsoever. But even without those OHL stats, he's still been super impressive. In the top Czech league, he's been able to get 9 points in 26 games, and in the World Juniors, he got 2 points in 5 games for the Czech Republic. In Bob McKenzie's recent midseason rankings, though, he had him going in the second round. To me, Mysak is a criminally underrated prospect, and that is just proof of it. I don't think he should go outside the top 15, and if you get him outside the top 15, you pretty much have yourself a steal. He's a guy that has stats eerily similar to guys like Martin Necas and has an amazing speed and skill game that will directly translate to the NHL in my opinion and will make him at least a top 6 winger. Now, speaking of top 6 wingers, I'm now going to get into my number 11 pick, my 11th best prospect in 2020, that being Dylan Holloway. Now, just like Jan Mysak, I've been able to watch a lot of Holloway in the past couple weeks, and again, like Mysak, I'm really convinced at this point that he will be an impact player in the NHL. Now, the 6', 18-year-old with the University of Wisconsin has had himself a pretty solid season. Nothing amazing, but for a draft-eligible player in the NCAA, it's pretty much as good as you can get. Now, just like Zari, he is a pretty old player, all things considered in this draft, but so far in the NCAA at age 18 has been able to get 8 points in 23 games. Also, you have to factor in the teammates he has in Turcotte, Keandre Miller, and of course Cole Caulfield, who are hogging up all the ice time on that team too. That's a situation that I think once Holloway gets more opportunity, I think could be NHL ready as soon as next season potentially, maybe in April for whoever team ends up getting him. But Holloway is a guy that is amazing in both areas of the ice, and defensively especially will be surprising a lot of people, and very soon. But now getting into the top 10, and finishing at my 10th spot, my 10th best prospect in 2020, I have to go with Swedish winger Noel Gunler. Now, Noel Gunler to me is, again, like Mysak, one of the more underrated prospects in this draft. The right winger, age 18, has had a pretty great SHL season up to this point, and the skill is obviously apparent. But for some people, he isn't even a first-round prospect. In Bob McKenzie's rankings, I think he had him at 27 or something. To me, Noel Gunler is a top 10 prospect, and the skill will show itself in the NHL someday. Now, so far, through 34 SHL games, Gunler has been able to get 2 goals, 7 assists for 9 points. Even though he is an October birthday and technically he is an older prospect, that still is super impressive. And even without the points, the skill that he has is on show every single game. He's a guy that I think at the NHL someday, if given the chance and given the patience, I think will be a first liner too. This skill is up there with guys like Nils Hoglander in the past, and I think he will go in the same kind of route. To me, Gunler though is a top 10 prospect and is still to this day getting so massively underrated. But now getting into my 9th best prospect in 2020, I'm going to go with Canadian center Cole Perfetti. Now, the 18-year-old has had a pretty great season, all things considered, and Cole Perfetti is one of those guys that just shows how good this draft class is. Cole Perfetti right now sits at 82 points in the OHL in like 46 games, and he's at 9. That just shows you how strong the top 10 is, and Cole Perfetti is a big reason towards that. Now, I don't have anything against Cole Perfetti. It's mostly because the other prospects that are ahead of him have impressed me even more, but Perfetti, no matter what, should go top 10, and likely will go top 10 in this draft. But we're going to continue the trend of the OHL, and heading into my 8th best prospect for 2020, I'm going to go with the best defensive prospect in this draft, that being Jamie Drysdale. Now, I say defensive, but Jamie Drysdale really does specialize in that offensive ability. The 17-year-old Canadian defenseman has had a brilliant season so far with the Erie Otters of the OHL, and so far, throughout the next few months, is not looking to stop whatsoever. Now, Drysdale, up to this point in the OHL, is just over a point per game with 38 points in 36 games, 7 goals, and 31 assists. And also, Team Canada at the World Juniors got 3 points in 7 games, looking right at home and honestly being pretty great throughout that whole tournament. It also is kind of like Cole Perfetti, where it just shows how good this draft class really is, that a guy like Jamie Drysdale, who's so good and so dominant, can find himself at 8th overall. There is just a couple other guys that I just slightly prefer, and even in the OHL too. And yes, sir, we're going to continue with the OHL train again. Heading into my 7th best prospect in 2020, I gotta go with my boy, Marco Rossi. Now, the Austrian stud has had himself an unbelievable OHL campaign, and while it slowed down a little bit, he is still one of the best producers in this entire draft, and right now is leading the OHL in scoring. Now, the Austrian center right now is tied with Perfetti in OHL scoring, but with much less games played, currently having 82 points, 28 goals, 54 assists in 38 games. To me, Marco Rossi is one of those players that can almost bring it all. I think his defensive game is pretty underrated, and he's a pretty physical player for just 5'9". And obviously the size will deter some teams, I think, like it would a guy like Cole Caulfield last draft, but the offense is certainly there, and again, he uses that small speed and small size like Cole Caulfield to get past defensemen and to score goals. He's a guy that I think will be amazing in the NHL someday. The same thing like Cole Caulfield and the same route as a guy like Alex DeBrincat. But now we're going to get off the OHL train and now to the European train. And starting us out at number 6, I have Tim Stutzle. The main German in this draft has been amazing so far this season and is getting the credit that he simply deserves. Now, I personally don't see him as the third best prospect in the draft like some people do at this point, but I am still very high on Tim Stutzle, and he is still one of the best European prospects in this draft. Now, Stutzle, currently in 31 games in the DEL, has found himself with 7 goals, 22 assists, and 29 points. Also being a point per game in the World Juniors with Team Germany, getting 5 assists in 5 games. Stutzle, though, is really the real deal. He could be a guy that could be in the NHL as soon as next season, already being great against men in the DEL. But the points do back that up. The skill, the speed, the physicality is already there as an 18-year-old, and he'll likely join Maurice Seider as German studs to enter the NHL next season. But now getting us into the top 5, my top 5 best prospects in 2020, and at number 5, I'm going to go with Alexander Holtz. Now, between Stutzle and Holtz, there is really almost no gap whatsoever. Stutzle was almost number 5 until I went with my gut, and my gut said Holtz, because I've loved Holtz for a while, and I still think he's fantastic. Holtz right now, the Swedish 18-year-old, has had a brilliant SHL campaign, and while a lot of people will label him as a one-way guy who can only score goals, there really is a lot more to Holtz's game than meets the eye. Now, currently in 26 SHL games, Holtz been able to get 7 goals, 5 assists for 12 points thus far. And as an 18-year-old, 17/18-year-old, those are very impressive stats. Also getting 5 points in 7 games to Team Sweden and just being an offensive machine. To me, Holtz is a guy that, again, will be labeled as just a goal scorer, but the playmaking of Holtz, I think, is one of the most underrated assets of any player in this draft. He is an amazing passer, and especially as of late, has been very good in that department in the SHL. I've noticed that a lot lately, but Holtz is the guy that brings a lot more of a complete package offensively, and while defense is still something to be concerned with, the offense is 100% going to be there. Now, speaking of offensively minded Swedish wingers, we're now going to continue that, going into my 4th best prospect in Lucas Raymond. Now, the 17-year-old right winger, also in the SHL, has done pretty well for himself. Now, it's a much more different situation to Holtz. Holtz gets all the ice time on his team, while for Frölunda, Lucas Raymond has kind of gotten none of that, but still so far has been able to produce pretty well. Now, still at age 17 and with not a lot of ice time, Lucas Raymond has been able to get 4 goals, 4 assists for 8 points so far in 22 SHL games. But again, that's with pretty bad ice time, and again, still being as young as age 17. To me, Lucas Raymond is still the real deal, and he showed that at the World Juniors, getting 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points for 7 games, and also having a lot of nice streaks throughout that tournament. Lucas Raymond, though, is a guy just like Holtz that is beaming with offensive potential. But I think even more than Holtz at this point. He's a guy that offensively has such a high ceiling to not just produce solidly in the NHL, but to be one of the top Swedish scorers in the NHL someday. And honestly, I could go between Lucas Raymond and my number 3 pick every single day. It's almost a constant battle. But settling in at number 3 in my February mock draft, my 3rd best prospect in 2020, I gotta go with my boy, Anton Lundell. Anton Lundell is one of those prospects, just like a Noel Gunler or Jan Mysak, who is getting heavily disrespected in this draft. The 18-year-old center has been getting a better point per game pace than Capo Caco and is the best defensive center in this draft. Sign me up. Now, currently in 28 games with HIFK, he's been able to get 6 goals, 13 assists for 19 points. And again, as I said before, through this part of the season, right now Anton Lundell has a better point per game pace than Kaapo Kakko did last year. And Kaapo Kakko was my #1 guy in the draft last year. And on top of that, amazing offensive production, Anton Lundell to me, again, is the best defensive forward in this draft. Not even just for centers. He's a guy that provides so much value. And while he might not get 100 points in the NHL someday, I think he will be a point per game pace guy at the NHL someday with his amazing hockey IQ, and the defense that comes along with it will be amazing for the team that drafts him. But heading in on to my #2 pick, this is where it gets a lot more complicated, I would say, but still a lot more obvious. To me, the second best prospect in the draft is Quinton Byfield, and there's not much debate for me personally. Quinton Byfield is the best center in this draft too, currently sitting at age 17 and still dominating the OHL. Now, especially after the World Juniors, it seems like there's been a lot of Quinton Byfield hate out there. And I just want to set the record straight that Quinton Byfield is still one of the top prospects in this draft and should not go past 2nd overall. If you get Quinton Byfield at 3rd, 4th, or 5th, consider yourself winning that draft, because Quinton Byfield still should go 2nd overall. Currently, through 37 OHL games, has 31 goals, 41 assists, for 72 points. Yes, he didn't have the greatest World Juniors, but he's 17 years old. He was pretty much the same age as Lafreniere last year, and we were all going crazy about how Lafreniere was a huge disappointment last year, and then we saw how good he's been so far this year. Quinton Byfield is a guy that will dominate in the NHL someday with the unique speed, skill, and physicality combo. He's a guy that would be a first-line center at the very least. But now we gotta get into #1. In my opinion, the best prospect in the 2020 draft. Quinton Byfield is great. Lucas Raymond is great. Anton Lundell is fantastic. But obviously, Alexis Lafreniere will go 1st overall. And especially after the World Juniors, there's really no doubt about it. The 18-year-old left winger from Quebec is a guy that I think will, again, go 1st overall. And especially after the World Juniors, I don't think there's much debate at this point. But even with all the pressure and all the things on Lafreniere's back right now, he's still been the best he's ever been. Currently in 39 games in the QMJHL, has gotten 24 goals, 60 assists for 84 points, and obviously the World Junior stats speak for itself, having 10 points in 5 games. Alexis Lafreniere is the real deal. He'll be an NHL Impact player next season, and if he doesn't win the Calder Trophy, it would almost be a disappointment. That's how good Alexis Lafreniere is right now, and that's how NHL ready he is too. But that was my top 15 prospect rankings. Of course, with this video, I need to hear y'all's thoughts down in those comments down below. Let me know what you think about my top 15 prospect rankings and who you think are the best prospects in this draft. And also, if you want to go the extra mile, let me know your rankings as well. Of course, comment down below your thoughts, but also click on this card right here to watch all of my 2020 NHL draft content right in one place. Of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Share this video with your friends. Get today's mock draft out there, boys, because it is coming down to the wire. My name's Nathan, and I'll see you on the next video or stream. Goodbye.